I think the mood is a bit more positive. There's the gloom and doom. I think it's gone, but we're still not out of the woods as a world. It's clear that we've shifted globally.
Yeah.
That the developing countries are the ones where they're providing growth opportunities, and that the traditional developed world is still facing some challenges.
But what Davos has done is reiterate synergies. Even though growth may be in emerging economies, markets for consumption are still in the West. And with the session, for instance, that says the West is not working, there's concern that employment numbers are still subdued in the United States. Inflation may be rising in Europe, particularly in Great Britain, as we can see, and what that's going to mean for the consumer in those economies as we are producing more.
Well, it's going to mean that we have to look at alternative markets, I think, which is where these developing countries come in. There is a growth in the US. In fact, there was one session where it was said relative to Europe, US is actually making some recovery. But I don't think that is sufficient to sustain the economies, particularly for countries like South Africa, where we're still largely an export-driven economy. So we have to look at those alternative markets, the new markets for us. Being invited to BRIC is also hopefully going to bring up an opportunity. So, yeah, we have to think differently.
Yeah. Of course, when you mentioned BRIC, obviously it's the profile of South Africa and a huge delegation of South African ministers and business people such as yourself. How have you lobbied for greater access to trade?
Well, this has been a process. I think if you look at South Africa being involved in IPSA and the engagement and the state visits that the president has had, I think this is about issues paying off. Also, the interaction here in Davos has helped. I mean, last year there was a great presence in South Africa, putting it in the spotlight, and people now have visited South Africa. They have a sense of what we do, what we're capable of as a country. I think that has helped to see that over and above sport, but there is possibilities to have businesses that are sustainable.
I mean, the co-chairs of the World Economic Forum this year really are indicative of this changing global environment. You're talking about a co-chair who leads a big corporation in India, one who leads a big corporation in the People's Republic of China, and this raises this idea of trade among South-South economies. For Africa, where do we feature? Because the one area that we're really limited on is competitiveness in the manufacturing space. As the IDC CEO, it is your job, fundamentally, to try to find funding for industrial projects.
Well, if I listen to the discussions now, the focus is not only on trade with Africa, which is actually good. That means now people are seeing South Africa not as an opportunity just to give grants and give support, but also to start businesses. So as IDC, we make available financing, and in fact, we're doing it for the rest of the African continent. And having these interactions also gives us a sense that what are the people looking for, those investors, because at the end of the day, investors want to make sure that they invest in an entity or in a country where they'll be able to make returns.
Governance has come up as a sub-theme. People say, yes, it's true. Africa may be the fastest growing region after Asia, and certainly of the top 10 fastest growing economies, 6 are African, but the biggest limitation in Africa, infrastructure and governance.
What has been encouraging is that we're talking about it. I mean, we're saying as Africans, we need to ensure that we check up our governance. There are countries which have improved, South Africa being one of them, but it is important that it is something that the whole continent embraces. The issue of infrastructure, we still have some work to do there. But I think there is opportunities, and there's been cases where we can see that people can invest in infrastructure and make it a success.
Okay, lots been said about inclusive growth. What does that mean?
That means the growth should result in jobs being created. It should result in that in some of those people who've been marginalized before feel that they are being involved in that. People in the rural areas, for an example, do participate. So it's not the growth that it should only be a growth with no jobs being created, but it should ensure that every part of the community takes place.
Okay, thank you so much, Geoffrey Qena, for your insights. That's where we have to leave it for the World Economic Forum, coming to you live from Davos, Switzerland. A big African contingent, a very big contingent from South Africa, obviously as a precursor to South Africa's president being invited to the Heads of State Summit of the Brazil, Russia, India, China Committee of Presidents.